What's going on, ladies and gents? It's your boy Neosynthesis, back at you with something a little bit different than we normally are doing on the channel. I've done one of these before, but I figured why not make another? We're at the end of the month. See if maybe any of my ideas have changed, or just generally how I feel about the meta, the just how everything's shifted and played out, and whether or not I think decks are stronger or weaker than they were. My perception, if my perception has really changed over the format.
Yeah.
Okay, so without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and see if I can't pick out what I think are the very best decks. Sort of VW. I think they're just, insanely strong. All their synchro options, the insane consistency they have, being able to make VFD turn one. It's really, really, really good. All right, and then next up, I am also going to be putting Drytron in S tier. Pretty much nobody makes better first turn boards than Drytron. The deck is also just insanely good at being able to play around most hand traps, way better than most people can. So I think those two reasons are why and then also having like searchable hand trap negations and like Herald of the Orange Light, just more and more reasons why I think Drytron is one of the very best decks in this format. Okay, so now I'm looking for Tri Brigade. I also think Tri Brigade is going to be S tier. This deck is just so insane. It's like the best mid range deck out there by far. And I guess the only other deck that really is another mid range deck that kind of stands up is it's another variant, but it's just like the Tri Brigade birds. Tri Brigade, setting up Revolt. Both these decks basically are playing Revolt. Setting up Revolt is completely insane. That card, being able to like link on your opponent's turn and banish a monster or banish a card. There's just nothing that can really compete with that like level of consistency. And Bird Up makes some really degenerate boards with like the wind statues and the Apex Avians. So that's why I think that Bird Up belongs there. Next up in the A tier, I'm going to put Eldritch there. I think Eldritch is really, really strong, but I just don't think that there's a lot of skill expression in it. So that's one of the reasons why I think it just is there. It's kind of just like, hey, I drew my floodgates. Did you draw an out to my floodgates? Okay, I instantly win. So it's a really good like ladder deck to play, but I don't think that it's necessarily the greatest deck in the world right now. In that same vein is Adamancipator. Now I know Adamancipator actually has some pretty crazy first turn boards they can end on. Kind of similar to Drytron. Perhaps I just haven't seen enough of what this deck can really do. I would love to be proven wrong on this one. But I just think that Adamancipator is just not necessarily the strongest deck in the format. Another deck I'm going to put in that vein is going to be Invoked. There's a few different Invoked strategy, and then I guess I'll just put like my three kind of. And these decks are kind of one deck. Like the Alistar makes Shadal's playable, and he makes Thunder playable. And actually, I think it's more so like this. So Alistar's in this, but he's also in this. So I think Shadal and Invoked are pretty good, especially when you're running them together. So I'm gonna go ahead and put them in the A tier. Running these decks separate from each other is not good, right? Because their just engines aren't very powerful. But being able to make a Mechba and Winda is typically going to be pretty tough to beat. So I'm putting these in the A tier. Thunder's actually we're gonna just put it back in the pool for now. My opinions on Thunder have changed quite significantly since the last time we did one of these tier lists, and I think it belongs in a B tier. It's not on the same level as these A tier decks. The Shadal stuff is more consistent and better because it doesn't have limitations on it. If all the cards were off the ban list, Thunder would be way better. But one Colossus is pretty tough. One Dragonhawk, two Dragon Duo. It's not Dragon Duo. Dragon Roar. Sorry, I can't remember the name. But yeah, I don't think that it's necessarily the greatest thing in the world. I think I high rolled a lot because I did go on an insane win streak in Platinum with this deck, but I just don't think it's particularly good. And here's kind of a weird one, right? Because I don't particularly think Rongo Miniad is its own deck, but Phantom Knight Rongo is just about as crazy as you get. I don't think it's necessarily as consistent as the reason that I don't put it in the S tier with these like completely interactive decks, because it is just as uninteractive, is the pure fact that, by the way, this is like kind of poor because these two decks are one deck and these two decks are one deck. I just don't consider Heroics like their own deck. I just don't. I think number 84 pretty much belongs in a Phantom Knight deck, and Phantom Knights are like the best way to spam that guy out. So yeah, that's gonna be that. And I just don't think it's quite as consistent as these other degenerate like first turn you can't play against those decks. This is the only this is the only S tier deck that's not a you can't play deck, which is cool. I like Tri-Brigade a lot, and I think that they're pretty healthy for the game because it really is an interactive deck. Perhaps it's a little too strong and it drowns out a lot of competition, but I do think Tri is generally very good, very healthy for the game. And these are all like insane hardcore lockdown decks. And this is another hardcore lockdown deck, but it's just a little bit less powerful and a little bit less consistent than the other decks. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and move along. Next B tier deck is gonna be Dragon Maid. I think Dragon Maid's not bad at all. They can pop out a few negates. Yeah, I don't think they're necessarily super good. Their ceiling's relatively low compared to some of the other decks in the format, and I'm not sure how consistent they truly are. And there's a reason that Dragon Maid decks aren't topping everywhere you look. Next is going to be Dino. Dino's kind of in a similar vein. Dino has a few limitations in this format, but generally it's a pretty strong combo deck, and you can make some pretty insane turn 1 boards. You're using old cards like Lagia, who detach like 2 material, which is not really the best because it's like a one-time negate, but regardless of that, I still think Dino is really, really strong, and in the right hands, you can pile this deck to really, really good success, honestly. Next up, I'm trying to look through and kind of see if any decks like immediately just pop into my head. It's a shame there's no Numeron. I don't see a Numeron card here. I'm looking for like the Numeron gate. I would just slap it. Pure Zodiac. I think Pure Zodiac is kind of. I think Pure Zodiac is A tier. I think Pure Zodiac is like the the best like core. It's like the best backbone you can have in a deck. So because this format is so diverse and it's got so many really, really powerful and interactive cards, you're on a lot of tech cards. So Zoo is like one of my favorite decks to play. I think you can shove a lot of stuff in it. It just really depends on, and the results of your Zoo deck are going to come down to whether or not you played the, it's like you get like 20 flex cards in a Zoo deck where you don't have to run, you don't have to run that big of an engine. So you have a lot of flex cards. It's just whether or not you get the flex cards for the right situation. So I think Zoo is an A tier deck, and I think that's going to be my last like A tier deck. I think it's only going to get worse from here on in. So I'm also going to go ahead and put Dragon Link in B tier. I've recently been Dragon Link pilled a little bit. I've seen kind of the best boards that they can make, but it in terms of people playing deck, it's really hard to play optimally, and most people don't even want to try. So I'm going to put DDD also in that same exact category because the deck could be good, but Master Duel suffers from really good players don't want to play it because there's like no reason to. So some of these decks are not getting enough shine because there's not enough good players on the server. Perhaps if we made it to a theoretical world where there was like a challenger tier, we would be seeing more of these decks. But because I am not seeing the consistent success or like tournament success from these decks, I really can't put them any higher than B tier. But I think they've got a lot of untapped potential that like the right player could definitely unlock. I think you could probably play either one of these decks easily with an insanely high win rate into Platinum 1 because they are that good, but they're not the easiest deck in the world. So you need to be a good player, and that's why I want to put them in the B tier because there is a lot of knowledge you need to have before going into it. ABC, I've not seen too much ABC. Dragon Buster being limited is pretty tough. So we're going to put that in the C tier. Agnister. Agnister kind of does tons and tons and tons and tons of stuff, and it kind of ends on just about nothing, it feels like sometimes. So yeah, they're also going to go in C tier. I think Altergeist is most of the time just a worse Eldritch. Their trap engine is just not nearly as good. And yeah, Multifaker being limited is really painful. Burning Abyss is D tier. I've not seen a good Burning Abyss deck. Blue Eyes, D tier. The deck is really bad. Cyber Dragon, I was going to put in D tier. These decks are just not very good. I think this is Magic-Key or something. Maybe this is Magical. I don't know. D tier. Infernoids. I'm actually going to put Infernoids in C tier because they do insta-win if they can hit Grass is Greener. Cosmo, I think Cosmo's better than people are giving it credit for. Right, because we have 2 E-Tellies and 3 skill drains, so I think this deck is actually a little bit underrated, so I'm going to put it in the C tier. Definitely a cut above these guys. Dark Destroyer's a hell of a card. Grand Maju, it's got a really great OTK potential, and the deck is super cheap, so definitely think Grand Maju's pretty good. Mech Knights, Pure Mech Knights, I'll put that in the D tier. It's not really a real deck, but there are some mech decks that splash Mech Knights that are pretty good. Necroz is complete garbage. I don't know what this is, to be completely honest. I've recognized everything so far, but I don't know what that card is. Prank Kids, I think Prank Kids belongs in C tier. It's definitely pretty good. You can make some pretty. You go for a long time in that deck, so yeah, it's not bad. Paleo Frogs, I think Paleo Frogs are actually pretty good. Treat Toad is a completely sick card. Excuse me, his name is totally awesome now, but yeah, I think Treat Toad's pretty dang good. And then I'm going to put Spiral in B tier. Master Plan is a great card, and so is Double Helix. And the only thing they have limited, I think, is Quick Fix. So yeah, that deck is super, super good. U-Link Spiral is something you can do. It's not nearly as good as it used to be, right, because of Master Rule 5, but that deck can definitely pop off. And it's got a lot of really powerful tools. Magician's... What's it called? Magician Souls being out also helps that a lot, more than it helps Dark Magician. Trap Tricks, that's another C tier, just not a very good deck. Live Twins, they don't even have their boss, and yeah, I don't think they're particularly good. Is this Black Wings? I think this is Black Wings. Goodbye. I don't know what you are, honestly, so if I don't know what the card is itself, it can't be very good, guys. I promise the deck cannot be very good. You don't have to believe me. You can just play it and lose a bunch in ranked. Fluffles, there's definitely some interest for me, at least in Fluffles, because they have the potential to OTK and they can win games for sure. So better than the D tier decks that I think are just, that there might just be better versions of all those decks out in the format. Lightsworn, I think Lightsworn's also a D tier deck. It's just not very good. Maybe you hit Grass and you have a 60 card Lightsworn deck, it's completely insane. But other than that, I don't think it's very good. Lunalights, we'll put that in C tier because I think that they are interesting. They've got, all their cards are legal in this format. And I think they are just a cut above all the D tier decks that I've listed. Cyber Dragon, I will move it up to C tier. I think it belongs there. Madolches also belong in C tier. They're cute, they're interesting, but they lose to Zeus. They lose to a lot of stuff. They're it's an older format. Tiramisu is still a completely insane card, but I think we're past Madolche's shine period. Similarly, Monarchs is another deck that I think is pretty not the greatest. Playing Domain Monarchs is definitely the best way to do it right now, just as a Floodgate deck, but I don't think it's particularly broken. And here's actually our last A tier deck, and that's going to be Pendulum Magician. There's an FTK variant of Pendulum Magician out there. Yeah, this deck is broken. I will give Pendulums that their deck is just completely good. And Electromite is out, and they have Astrograph that are legal in the same format. So yeah, I actually think that deck is super good. Probably the most underplayed deck in Master Duel because it's 2000 IQ big brain. Trains are pretty bad. I hate to be that guy, but they're pretty bad. Salad, I think Salad is it's between B and C, so I'm gonna go ahead and slap it into B. that deck really can grind with the best of them. It feels like sometimes when you're playing against Salamandrake that they never run out of steam. Another deck that is super annoying if it gets going is the Sky Striker deck. Yeah, Rose is a completely crazy card. All of their one links are super good. Yeah, I think most of they have engaged legal, so most of the players who've played against this deck kind of understand why it's so strong. It's just very resilient. Gets a lot of free cards. It's super, super good. Sub-tier, I think they're solidly D-tier. It's another kind of a skill drain, slow you down, floodgate, not necessarily a skill drain, but floodgate deck. Yeah, so I think that it's kind of not necessarily as good as Eldritch, which is the best control deck, which the problem with control decks is if you're playing a control deck that's worse than another control deck, like if you're playing like any of these kind of control decks that I have, I mean, there's a couple. Yeah, I guess it's just these two control decks, these three control decks. You're just getting so harshly outclassed by Eldritch that it's impossible to win against Eldritch. You probably have a decent chance against the rest of the field, but in a control meta, where control is actually very good, you need to be playing like a good control deck. True Draco is, I think, kind of the exception to what I just said. This is another skill drainy beatdown deck, but it's actually surprisingly good, and sometimes its ceiling will surpass that of Eldritch. So definitely keep this deck in mind. True Draco's 3 skill drain is super big for them. They still have Diagram legal. I don't know if that's banned in the TCG or what the deal is on that. But yeah, this deck's actually pretty good. No masterpiece, but can't have everything you want. Heroes, I think they're C tier. Not necessarily the best deck, not necessarily the worst deck. They get a lot of good cards, but all their effects are really vulnerable to hand traps. So that's kind of where I stand there. Red Eyes, I think they're solidly D tier. No Dragoon. Maybe if they had Dragoon, they would get to be C tier, but the deck just has no payoff at the moment. And then Zombies. Actually, I'm going to put Zombies in C tier because there are some interesting combo Eldritch decks out there that play Zombie World and all this crazy uni-zombie stuff. And I actually think that deck is much more interesting than people are giving it credit for. There's been some pretty decent zombie support printed since the last time I stopped playing. And I think maybe were one or two okay cards. I mean, you could say every single archetype in the game is one spellbook of judgment away from being broken, right? So that's a terrible argument to make, but I think that zombies, when they get their next little they're just waiting for a couple cards, and then that deck will actually get to be meta, I think. But like I said, you can say that about everything, but there perhaps just isn't a good enough zombie link payoff quite yet. I know a lot of zombies are dark. A lot of zombies are actually earth as well, so I don't know if this is necessarily going to be good. But Dark the Dark Charmer is a card that came out in the TCG recently, which I think would be useful in a deck like that, perhaps, and useful in a meta of zombies. So, yeah, pretty interesting. I think my S tier didn't really change that much. Perhaps I bumped Eldritch down out of it, but I kind of explained that I think that Eldritch is very much a deck where you kind of win or lose based on your hand a lot of the time. And there's just not that much skill expression, whereas the rest of the decks on this list that are above it, I think, have a lot of skill expression and a lot of things you can do. It's pretty clear that those are the 4 best decks, in my opinion. But, yeah, I don't love the way that this whole list is divvied up, right? Because there's a lot of cards that go in multiple decks. For example, this Rongo and Phantom Knight thing. This makes it appear like there's so many A tier decks, but there's really only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 A tier decks. So I think as long as you're playing something in S or A, if you have serious intent on climbing, you're good. Those are pretty good strategies. I believe I have a deck profile on my channel for this one, and this one. I also have a deck profile for this on my channel. So, yeah, if you guys want to see my lists, I believe I piloted just about every single one of them from unranked to plat. I actually have just been playing Thunder and Shaddoll Implat, I didn't really climb with them, but all the other decks I have extensive knowledge with. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy this little tier list. I know you guys really seemed to dig the last time I did this, so I figured I would put out another one for you guys here at the end of the season to see if kind of any of my opinions have changed. And a lot of the times people were asking me about decks that weren't included in the original tier list because it was just more so a thinner amount of like the top decks. So anyway, it's been your boy Neosynthesis. Hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys next time, whatever that is.